Hello, hopefully I'm live or alive. Both are good. And so, anyone who's watching this retrospectively, uh, you can skip through. There'll be a timestamp in the description and a timestamp as the first comment that will let you know where the sleep meditation begins. Prior to that, I will settle into this, having a bit of a chat, and then taking ideas on my notepad, which I have 1, 2, 3, about enough for about 18 more of these, I think. And then I'm going to have to get a new notepad to write in. What does the rest of my shirt say? I don't know how much of my shirt you can see. Driving home for Christmas. Just a Christmas shirt. Yeah, you definitely don't want people jaywalking if I'm driving. Not that I'd want to be driving, if I can help it. Pickles is a very typical cat name, I think. Obviously, Pickles as a cat name, Pickles is, well, as you know from the story, the cat that was in the place Nan was evacuated to during World War II. And so that's why, with Pickles as a suggestion, I ended up making the story about my Nan. It's better to be notified that Dan's live rather than dead. Being invisible would be a good thing. That'd be fun. Yeah, a Dan surrounded by books. Not enough books. I'd quite like a library. Unfortunately, I don't have space for a library or enough books to make a library. So I've just spent all day, literally until 9:45 my time, making a recording some audio for a 80,000 not sleep story, just a story. If people fall asleep to it, then that's up to them, but just a story that I'll have to edit. It's very long, so I have to edit it and post it at some point. I recorded, I've just finished reading A Christmas Carol. Yeah, tiddles piddles everywhere. Yeah, so I've just finished recording A Christmas Carol, as in the story, not me singing A Christmas Carol, because that wouldn't happen. Just recorded me reading A Christmas Carol, and I will have to try and edit all the audio for that, I assume, because I made a few errors. I was initially hoping to make so few errors that I would just think, sod it, I'll gloss over the kind of handful of errors in the entire story and just post the whole thing unedited, because I don't really have that much time to edit the entire Christmas Carol audio. But then thought, no, I keep making more errors. I'm going to have to edit this. So I suspect I'm going to, because the difficulty is that if I had someone with me while I recorded it who was making timestamps of exactly when the errors were, then it would make the editing really quick and simple because you just say, right, give me the list of timestamps. I'll dive into the footage, into the audio recording, and just edit those bits. But obviously, because I'm trying to just do the whole thing in like 2 takes, I did it in because my voice was hurting a lot. If I tried to do the whole thing, doing the whole thing in 2 takes, I can't remember the exact locations of those bits. I can't use a stopwatch or a timer because I have to be reading. So I have to be looking at the words that I'm reading. And I would never remember a time because obviously the audio recording device has a timer on it, shows the time that I'm at. So I can look at it, but once I get to the second mistake, I will have forgotten the time that the first mistake was at. And then once I get to the third mistake, I've forgotten the time of the first 2 mistakes. And then by the time I'm at like the fourth mistake, I've forgotten how many mistakes I've made in the first place or the times of any of them. And then once I press stop on the recording, I've literally forgotten everything that I've just done. So I the only thing I can do is have to listen to the whole thing back again from the start, listening to me ramble on, telling a Christmas carol from 1843. And I'm just going to have to listen to the whole thing and try and find the errors to edit them out. Or just decide it's too much hard work and then I'll just end up releasing something and putting a little kind of caveat thing saying, by the way, this is as if you heard me do it live to camera. I was tempted to do that. I was tempted just to record the whole thing live to camera during a live stream so that I could use that as an excuse for bad editing. Yeah, my camera, my phone has that, has a lap thing, but obviously the screen turns itself off after like 15 minutes or something of it being on, and so I then would have to turn the screen off, stop talking to think about turning the screen on, and to just be able to do a lap thing. Likewise, my audio device has a bit that I can press a button to do make timestamps, but I've got the same problem that I can't do that and focus on reading in real time. So the mistakes aren't bad. It's just things like where I've said a word wrong or something. I've misread a word because I'm trying to obviously read in real time without any without any run throughs first. Because obviously, if I ran through reading the Christmas Carol first and then reread it, I've then just doubled my work. So it is actually more time consuming to have done, say, a rehearsal of it and then have to do the real thing than it is to literally just start at the beginning and read the whole thing once and think I'm probably going to make, I think I said the wrong word, or did that thing where you read and you skip a sentence accidentally somehow, or you make a mistake because you think you've skipped a sentence because the sentence doesn't make sense to you, and you're reading thinking this makes no sense, I must have just missed a bit, and so now you trip over yourself because your eyes, while you're trying to read out loud, your eyes are backtracking. While you're trying to read forward, your eyes have gone back to try and read the bit you've just read. So you're kind of doing 2 things in your brain at once. You're reading the line before and into the next line to make sure that that's exactly what you were supposed to have read and that you did actually go to the end of the line and then start on the beginning of the next line while you're reading the line that you're on, saying that, and then you end up hitting a point where your brain thinks, no, I'm sorry, I can't actually read 2 sentences simultaneously like this. And then you mess a word up only because you thought that you're on the wrong line, even if you weren't. So that's happened a couple of times. So yeah, it's there's not too many mistakes, but there's probably maybe a dozen or something in the entire novel where I said the wrong thing or did the wrong thing. I think I haven't looked at the time when I press stop each time. I think it's about 4 hours long to read the whole novel. um, and yeah, I had to do it in two lots because it was getting quite painful on my throat reading continuously without any. When I'm doing this, what I do this evening, I get to pause and I get to slow my speech down and I get to take time over what I'm doing. The same when I'm teaching. If I'm teaching, it's not as bad as I think people think when you're teaching, because you pause and you listen to someone giving questions and sort of asking a question. And while they're asking a question, you're not talking. It's much harder to be doing something where you have to talk continuously for, say, 2, 3, 4 hours without any break, with no pausing beyond a full stop length pause of maybe half a second or something. Um, so that makes it that much more difficult. Um, Obviously, the audio is only going to end up on YouTube. It's not going to end up anywhere else because the audio is going to have the sound of me turning pages and things like that. And I think across the 4 hours, there are a couple of background sounds from time to time. But yeah, so I will start listening to it tomorrow. I've got to edit tomorrow's audio for tomorrow evening as well. I haven't even done that yet. For the video that will go live, I don't know what the sleep meditation is that's going live tomorrow. I can't remember what ones we've made here. So yeah, I regularly have coffee with honey normally. So yeah, over on the Mind Changers channel, for those who don't know, I know some of you know because you've commented over there as well as here. Over on the Mind Changers channel, something I'm doing currently is, back in 2015 when I lost my job, my full-time job, which was working for the local authority, supporting what the government felt were the most challenging families in the United Kingdom. So that was the remit, was that the government set up a team of people in each area around the country who had to go and deal with the most challenging families in the country who are based in their area. So it was supposed to be like the families which cost the police, social services, the benefit system, etc., and schools and what have you, the most money to deal with. And the idea of my job was to go in and make those families be doing what the government felt they should be doing so that they wouldn't cost any money. And the idea was it's more cost effective to pay people like me to go and deal with the families so that they don't have to pay for those families anymore for years to come. So that's what I was doing. And then I got made redundant, lost my job in 2015. And I had enough money to last me 6 months with no other income. And so I knew I had about 3 months where I could dedicate it to trying to make an income rapidly. And if I wasn't successful in that 3 months, then I would have to have another job because I'd only have 3 months before my money runs out. And fortunately, 5 years later, I'm still here doing this kind of thing, which is also why a part of my brain is always, not necessarily to the extent of obsession, but is always looking out and thinking, right, am I doing well enough on YouTube to be able to put time into it, because I have to put time into stuff that I do. So yeah, one thing I did back in 2015 was I had the camera that I had back then, which was I had a decent camera, but I didn't have a microphone. It didn't have a microphone input bit. So I was using that camera to record my videos, which meant that the sound quality wasn't very good. It was a 5.1 surround sound onboard camera, but that meant it just picked up all the sound around the camera, not just the sound of me. And it meant that it just wasn't as good quality sound as when I use a microphone, a professional kind of microphone. So, and I couldn't plug any microphone into it because it didn't have a microphone input, um, which is stupid given that it was a stupidly expensive camcorder that I had. I'd bought it when HD cameras weren't really a thing, and it was an HD camcorder. And yet HD TVs had only just come in. So at the time I purchased it, it was a very, very good camera. It just didn't have a microphone input. So back in 2015, I decided, right, I've got to make the income quickly. What can I do? Let's create a whole load of helpful e-courses. So I did one on helping people to sleep, one on calming anxiety, one on IBS. I can't remember what else. I've got them all saved, and I edited them all very lightly, but because I had to do the work quick, and I had editing problems because my computer wasn't powerful enough to handle the footage, and so I would be trying to edit this footage that would go sort of be, and now it's going to, yeah, and that's what it'd be like for the whole duration. So to edit 1 hour of footage would take me about a week or two to edit, because that's how fast I would be hearing the footage that I'm trying to edit. And so it was really hard to do subtle edits to it because I just couldn't pick them out. So I would only edit out the biggest bits. Um, um, but what came out of it was obviously that I created all these courses that I wasn't happy enough with them to make them available for sale. And so I didn't do anything with them. They've just sat on my computer for 5 years with no one ever seeing them and no one ever knowing anything about them. So I decided to just the other day, in fact, I thought the Mind Changers website might be a good place to put them. So I thought, let's edit them together as just one long video. So the idea was each course was going to be less than an hour long, where it sort of does an introduction, says this is what you're going to learn on this course. This is what hypnosis is. This is what self hypnosis is. This is stuff about, information about whatever the problem is that is being tackled. Here's an example of hypnosis just to get you, sort of give you a 5-minute taste of what hypnosis is like. And then here's, not too long. Here's the, how often to use it, all that kind of information. And then here's the main self hypnosis bit. And then here's some further information that can hopefully help you. So I had the same kind of structure to all of them. And I've just never ever, I don't think hardly anyone has seen most of them, because they've just sat on my computer. I've uploaded a couple of the bits to this channel in the past, but didn't do anything else with them. So I've just had to lower my standards. So I just sort of thought, well, people might find it helpful, even if it's not highest quality. People might still think it's not the highest quality, but it's helpful to me because I have that problem and I would like help with it. So that's kind of my reason for uploading it. I thought I can just, and I thought it was a nice break from the fact that on the Mind Changers, as you know, I literally had just put 100 hours per video in to the series I did before that. So for 4 videos running, I put 100 hours or so into each of those 4 videos. More hours actually into the last video, because I wrote 17,000 words for the 2-hour long video that I did as the last one. So the script is 17,000 words long. So I just thought it would be a nice break to find something a bit easier for me to do that will hopefully still be helpful to people at the receiving end, even though it probably won't get that many views. That's the trouble with the Mind Changers site, that obviously it's the sort of stuff that I used to post on this channel back when I used to get views of that kind of content on this channel. It just doesn't really get the views on the Mind Changers channel, but it's good to upload it there and try and be helpful to people. But yeah, shouldn't mention hypnosis. Yeah, I did them all in order except I jumped 42. Um, and then so I think I'm on like 45, something like that. So I did them in order, but I skipped 42. So I did everything else around it up to the end. With 42, I had to come back to. So I am now at whatever I was at prior to 42. Oh no, actually, I did another one out of order. I did the Oasis in the Mind out of order. That, which is the one that kind of annoyed me, because obviously I did it thinking the night before, I think it was, that we had recorded it, and I thought I really like this one with the counting sheep and all that lot. I think this would be a great one to release now. I think this will probably be my most popular one on my channel. I thought as soon as people hear it, they'll instantly think, I can't stay awake to counting sheep. I can't stay awake to counting down and all the stuff that goes on in that one, as you know. Um, I thought people are going to love this so much. I'm going to jump straight to that one as an excuse for not doing 42. I'm going to jump straight to that one, do that one. Everyone's going to love it. It's going to be brilliant. I'm going to wake up in the morning and it's going to say that it's number one on my list of how popular my videos are and how well they're doing, etc. So it tells you sort of, here's a rank of where this video is in relation to your other previous videos. I thought it was going to be really popular. And instead, obviously, that was the morning I woke up to literally hundreds of complaints about the ads that were every 3 minutes throughout the entire video, and a good percentage of thumbs down on that video. And it totally ruined that video taking off on YouTube, because once all that had happened, it was too late now. That was its chance to hit the YouTube algorithms, was for it to take off straight away. Once it misses those algorithms, it kind of drops out the system again. And so, yes, that was a huge shame that that had happened. But I had done that one thinking, I really like that one. That's one of my favorites that I've recently done. I'm going to edit that straight away, and that's going to be the one that's going to go live. Well, my view is that you're always, so one thing that I find is, I will ask for ideas in a minute. One thing I find is that people do this thing, newly trained people, for example, do this thing where you do, chatting and therapy and all that stuff, but you do the hypnosis separate from it. When the reality is that from the minute someone is interacting with you, if you're going to use hypnosis and you knowingly, then you're going to use it from the minute you start interacting, from the minute you start asking about the weather or start shaking the person's hand in non-COVID times. Right from the outset, you're starting to do hypnosis, from the way you sit down, from the way you breathe the same as the person, from the second you've sat down, the way you're matching or mirroring or whatever with their body language. Everything you're doing from the minute you start interacting with someone, you're doing hypnosis. So yeah, I find that I do that when I'm teaching. I do that on my videos. I do it on everything. I do it when I meet people, even at social gatherings, whatever it happens to be. Um, I'm sure I could hypnotize someone with an elbow tap. Um, that'd be a fun one. I haven't been. I probably wouldn't even get close enough to do an elbow tap. Um, but yeah, so the Oasis one was definitely one of my favorites over recent months. Um, but yeah, obviously over on the Mind Changers, the other positive is you get to see videos by Dr. David Lewis, and hopefully one day he'll improve the level of his microphone. He keeps being told by myself and by others, and yet it still seems to always be quiet. I don't know how he doesn't notice when he's editing. And I don't want to suggest that he just sends me all the footage to edit, because I don't have time to do all the work. Um, Yeah, I was nice and organized, always doing the same thing, and then I just went and did my own thing, went off track. Um, can you release it? Can I release what? What have I missed? Um, no, Oasis ended up doing okay, and that was, I think, because of the fact I released no videos after it, as you say. Um, but it didn't actually take off. It kept a steady, slow pace. So whereas if you look at something like my cabin in the woods, that's at, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of views, where it took off and kept going. The Oasis in the Mind one only continued getting a slightly higher rate of views than usual because there was no video after it. So had I released a video after it a week later, then people would have stopped listening to that one back when it had like 3,000 or 2,000 or whatever views. They would have stopped listening to that and carried on now just listening to whatever I posted next. It wasn't being actively promoted in the same way by YouTube, so it didn't have that big spike that I was kind of expecting. I was expecting it to do as well, if not better, than the Cabin in the Woods one, to really take off, because I thought people would instantly think, I'm going to give this a go. Yeah, David could do show and tells for hours and hours and hours of the stuff he's got knocking around just on camera. I'm sure there was something else I read somewhere. Um, that's the trouble. I don't see lots of stuff that goes by while I'm talking. Too busy talking. Sometimes on my videos, I've intentionally done it where I will make sure something's in the background that's going to get attention. So sometimes, or wear a t-shirt or something that I know I want to make sure that people are focused, and people will say, oh, I was distracted by something in the background that wasn't good. But actually, sometimes that's the whole point, that I want something in the background so that they're distracted from what I'm actually saying and doing, because they're busy going, what's that in the background there? What's that book? What's that thing on the shelf? What's that on his shirt, or whatever it happens to be? That has focused their attention and is holding their attention while I'm then doing something they're not paying attention to. So sometimes I'm doing things like that. If there's anything that suddenly appears that I don't seem to reference or talk about, and yet it happens to be sat there. Um, yeah, I remember a few years ago doing the Darren on a Heron image. Don't think he was impressed. I don't know. Right, I'll get ideas from you in just a minute. I'm going to have a bit of water first. I've got a new audio recording device as well. I'll see if I can get it in front of the camera. I don't think it moves enough to be in front of the camera. Let me move the camera to it. There. Hopefully I've not accidentally turned it off. So not a cheap one, but yeah, I've got that because it might improve even further the audio quality of what I do. What's better about it? The main selling point is that it has 32-bit float audio recording. So what that means to those who perhaps don't know, who are now thinking they're going to type, what's that? Yeah, that was on my one that's now over there. What the 32-bit float audio recording means is that it has a huge dynamic range. So the microphone, technically you don't have to set the gain. The microphone won't clip never mind how loud I get. And even if I get very quiet, if I crank up the volume, um, it won't end up. I won't have noise, a hiss on it. So it kind of that's its selling point. No, I recorded. I can't even remember if I've edited it. I recorded a random spur of the moment with last week's. So with that list, not that you can see it because of the light, with the list from number 47, I recorded a story that I just made up. Obviously, that's what I do. I recorded a story that I made up using that list. It was only a 30-minute story, just to give it a go, just to test it out the other day. And I started editing it, but I can't remember if I finished editing it. I start things and then end up busy doing other things at times. So yeah, so I had started editing a story about flying cars, about a woman going to work in the future in a city where there's flying cars and no cars drive on the ground. The ground is all green and lush, and where roads used to be is now essentially just big parks between buildings of green trees and meadow type stuff everywhere. Um, and the cars are all flying above you, kind of in their rows up above. And you've got drones up higher than the cars who travel around, and then they pass down through gaps specifically for them. Um, and then in the office, the woman uses augmented reality to make the office how she wants her office to be, so that with the glasses on, it all looks very much like the office she wants. And when she takes a break, she's got the augmented glasses on so that she can take a break down by the beach, for example. So yeah, so I'd made this random story just as a way of testing out the microphone. And so yeah, so it means, as you say, less editing. Because although I'm generally consistent, I'm facing a camera, I sit in the same place, the camera's in the same place, the microphone's in the same place, the setup was always the same settings, nothing ever changed, everything was always the same. I would still end up sometimes thinking, oh, I went into a bit of a quiet voice there. I'm going to have to. So I would always normalize it to the same volumes, that everything's peaking at -5 dB. But that means that for some tracks, there might have been a bit of noise on the track because of the fact that maybe I was just, for some reason, talking a bit quieter. Other times, I might end up. Oh, you saw the chocolate heart. You spying other things while I turn the camera. Other times, I might have been a bit too loud or something, and then it it always had a limiter on, so that it would never hit the top, but obviously it would hit a level still and would ruin it. So yeah, so the idea is that it just means hopefully I can do less. I need to do less editing to the audio. That's the plan. But my first outing with this new setup was that random 30-minute story I made up, which I don't think's brilliant. It was okay, but not my best. And I'll probably obviously edit it and then upload it at some point. The second outing was today, making the Christmas Carol story, which I've got to find a date to air that. Obviously, that was being done for my 80,000, kind of hitting 80,000 subscribers thing. I could release it Christmas Eve or something, because that's the date it takes place in the story, is Christmas Eve. So I could release it on Christmas Eve or something like that. Or I could release it earlier. There's not that long left now between now and Christmas. And I don't want to release it on the Tuesday when the normal video goes live. So yeah, so I'll have to decide when. I don't know what your thoughts are. When is best to release a Christmas Carol? As I say, I haven't edited it yet, but with any luck, tomorrow I will edit the Christmas Carol and edit tomorrow night's sleep meditation, and I'll probably spend the whole day doing the editing of both of those to get that all done. Um, and then I just have to decide on a time and I have to create the video from it as well. I don't know what the video will be yet, so I'll have to do that. Um, but yeah, from a posting perspective, Christmas Eve makes the most sense because that's only what 10 days away, I think. Yeah, 10 days away. So it's just over a week. It means that I get to post um, tomorrow's video as normal, next Tuesday's video as normal, and then a Christmas Eve video for those who want one on Christmas Eve, a Christmas Carol. I was trying to make it as close as possible to the 80,000, but obviously you here know that that's what it's for. And I'll say it in the description, although most people probably won't read that, but I'll say it in the description as well. And the flying cars one is, I don't know when I'll post that. I'll have to think of a time to post that. I could always edit that and have that as tomorrow's video because I've started editing it. I just don't think I ever finished editing it because I moved on to a different one or a different. I was editing the audio and I moved on to editing a video instead, I think, for the mind changes. And so never got that done. So feel free to start throwing out some ideas and I can write those down. Although I'm going to turn my back a second while I drink some water. So. And then this morning I was taking part in some hypnosis research. So a monk, an obstacle course. Yeah, this morning I was taking part in some hypnosis research that I have to finish tomorrow. That Adam Eason is doing with the University of Bournemouth. Yes, by Adam Eason. Yeah, I've done stage 1 and then I've got stage 2 to do tomorrow. I wasn't going to turn down the chance to be doing some hypnotherapy research. Yeah, to take part in some hypnotherapy research. Green Fairy. Golden Eagle. Magic. Chrysalis. But yeah, it was because I was doing the recording A Christmas Carol that I ended up getting the notification, setting up this live stream late and managing to get the notification out quite late. Mosaic. I keep looking forward. I've got a bright light in my face. And so when I look down, all I can see is the LED dots on my page in front of me. Yeah, I am old. Yeah, so all I can see when I look down is the LED dots of the light, which is annoying. So I have to keep adjusting my eyes trying to see that. Llama? Although I am probably going blind in my old age. That's not far off me. Dove. Last week, I think it was last week, we had tons of suggestions. Salt. Squirrel. I don't think squirrels have cropped up for a little while in stories. Obelisk. There's one I probably wouldn't be able to say or spell. Zoo animals. Shop. A moose in a hoose. We are doing the suggestions. Just move my arrow out the way. Oh, I didn't see that up there. Clockwork shop. Magnolia tree. There's a couple that have somehow skipped past me. Yeah, I've got clockwork. Some pain relief. Ghosts. Yeah, I've got quite a number. Pain relief seems to crop up quite often, so I've got quite a number of my sleep meditations cover pain relief as one of the key topics, as well as anxiety, stress, and worry. I can't remember off the top of my head which one. I think the bunny one is one of them. Yeah, worry is covered in every single story I do. So every single sleep meditation covers worry, anxiety, and stress. And then I've got many that also cover pain relief because that's a very commonly trying to write at the same time as talk um, recommended one. And I've got many covering the immune system as well because that's been commonly requested. Pendulum, but I can never remember. Um, and I never write. I don't think I usually write it down what the different ones are for. Some I just remember, but um, others I just can't remember what they're for. So I can't remember which ones are for things like immune system. It's always stuff that's suggested in these live streams, and then I record it specifically around things like the immune system. I did like three or something on the immune system back to back at the peak of the pandemic, at the sort of the first wave, because it was constantly being asked. So I kept covering it. And one of them was covering not necessarily boosting the immune system, but correct functioning of the immune system, because it was something that was asked in here was from someone saying that their problem is that their immune system attacks themselves. So it was more about covering that. Overthinking is covered in all of them as part of the whole worry aspect. So every single story of mine covers overthinking. Pocket watch. But yeah, I can never remember which ones are which because I don't normally even write down that someone has suggested a specific other problem. So I just end up uh, doing it because I read it as in the live chat in the first half of this section where we discuss stuff. Eucalyptus. Right. The suggestions are coming quite slowly, so I will probably make do with what I've got in a minute. That's okay. I haven't done stories covering fatigue specifically, other than the tiredness you get from overthinking and things like that, and from not sleeping correctly. Yes, don't fall asleep too quickly, Holly, until you hear my voice change. I'm glad that he likes the stories. So, what was it meant to be instead? Right. Putting my lid back on my pen. Right, let's have a look. Asleep. So uh, every time I look up, I blind myself. But then I need the light so I can see what I'm doing as well, and so that people can see me. Or else I just have lights above my head, and then I get big black lines going down me from the lights overhead. So, yeah, I could do with both of those, or get one and could do with the other. Yes, you can go to sleep. So, let's make sure I can read. Just take a moment to close your eyes and allow yourself to begin to relax. And as you begin to gently drift asleep, I'm just going to tell this sleep meditation in the background. And while I tell this sleep meditation in the background, I don't know whether you'll drift asleep faster to the sound of my voice, or perhaps to the spaces between my words. And as you begin to comfortably drift asleep, you can have a sense of climbing a mountain. And you're climbing up that mountain towards a monastery that you can see way up high up the side of the mountain. And as you near that monastery, you keep pushing on, increasingly motivated. The crunching snow beneath your feet, the feeling of the cold air on your ears and your cheeks. And you can notice a slight numbness setting into your fingers. And at this point, that numbness is just a comfortable numbness. Your fingers are well gloved, but just enough cold is getting through to make them feel a slight numbness, just enough to remind your fingers that you're climbing in the cold. And yet, despite that slight numbness in those fingers, you can continue climbing, and it just helps you to be aware that you're undergoing this challenge. You've been working really hard up this mountain, striving to get to the top. And this journey hasn't been easy, but that hasn't led to you quitting. You've continued to climb higher and higher. And now that monastery is in sight. And that spurs you on, motivates you to continue your journey. And as you continue that journey, getting closer and closer to the monastery, so you notice some figures walking around outside the monastery. You see that there are some monks just roaming around the outside, each one looking like they're walking in such a measured, purposeful way. And so you watch while you climb at the way they seem to so purposefully be walking around the grounds of the monastery. And as you arrive at the monastery, so you pass through an archway. And almost as soon as you've passed through that archway, and the wind seems to die down, seems to calm right down, and your body feels warm from the effort of climbing, And yet, those hands still feel a sense of the cold, a slight sense of numbness. And as you touch the hair that's touching your forehead, to move it off your forehead, and your fingers gently touch your forehead, you can feel the coolness from those fingers gently moving around your forehead. And because your face and your head is quite warm from all that effort, all that hard work of climbing the mountain, it really accentuates the coolness from the fingers. And you feel that coolness, that almost a blue numbness gently passing around the head, so comfortably cooling the head and the face, helping you relax, helping your breathing calm down, helping you feel a sense of peace and tranquility. And you walk among the monks, and you're searching for one specific monk. And you walk among them, and you look at each one as you walk, and you can see one monk sat on the wall of the monastery, on the wall that goes around the outside of the whole building and the grounds, sat on a slight pillar on that wall, facing out over the view down the mountain. And you suspect that that is the monk you're supposed to talk to. And so you begin to walk towards them. And then a monk steps up to you and stops you and says that here in the monastery, you need to walk with intent. You need to walk mindfully. Don't just march over to somebody, but consider every step that you take. Consider the experience of each and every step, and not just the foot step, but the way the legs move, the way the muscles adapt to raise the lower part of the leg, to raise the upper part of the leg, to move the lower part of the leg forward, to adapt your balance so that you remain upright on the leg that's still on the ground, that lowers that leg back down to the ground, aligns the foot correctly, lowers the heel of the foot to the ground just enough so that it makes the correct contact with the ground before those changes happen in your body, to shift your body weight around, to allow you to be able to lift the other leg from the ground. And at first, this sounds complicated, sounds like you could end up overwhelmed by focusing that much on every little detail just of the process of walking. But they explain that by focusing on every detail, your attention narrows and you begin to become absorbed in the moment. And you can become so absorbed in the moment that your attention is on these things while at the same time not being on them at all. That you're just in a flow state. You're just in a state of knowing exactly what's happening moment to moment. But you're not attending to it with any kind of labels. You're not saying to yourself, I'm lifting this leg by using these muscles, by contracting those ones, extending those ones, shifting my body weight here. You just know what your body is doing. You know that you're walking. And so that's what you do. You begin to focus on the walking. And you walk in a slower, more measured way while you do this. And as you take these slower, more measured steps, at first, you think to yourself it's a little bit like when a caterpillar is asked how it manages to walk with so many legs, or a millipede is asked how it manages to walk with so many legs, or any other creature with many legs. And just the process of trying to focus on so much at once causes them to trip over those legs. And you think on some level about that occurring, about how much more difficult walking becomes when you're told to walk, when you're focusing on the walking. But while you overcome that inner difficulty, while you overcome that self imposed difficulty, that difficulty by consciousness, you begin to allow it to become automatic. So it's automatic, and yet it's what you're attending to. And in that moment, you stop noticing sounds around you. You stop noticing movement around you. You stop noticing the sky. You stop noticing trees gently swaying. You just notice the experience of walking. And you almost feel in a strangely blissful state, a state that can perhaps start in your stomach or your chest, that can spread out, filling your arms and legs, and spread around to your head, all the way down to your feet, almost like a tingling blueness spreading throughout you, almost sounding like a million gently swinging tiny bells, twinkling one after the other, creating an almost sparkly tingle around and through your body of those bells making that sound. And as you continue walking, you almost have this sense of tiny, sparkling bits of light emanating from you, as if somehow you're in your own time, separate from the external time, walking closer and closer to that monk, feeling at one with the moment, like in your experience, there's no past, no future, there is only now. And as you walk to that monk, so the monk turns to face you. They gesture for you to join them up on the wall. And so you climb up onto the wall. You sit down in a similar position to them, making yourself incredibly comfortable. And they tell you to just gaze off at that distant golden eagle that's circling overhead, and just watch, keep your head forward, and just raise your eyes to watch that golden eagle circling, and just keep motionless, keep your head forward and still, keep your body relaxed and still, and just focus on that golden eagle as it gently circles overhead. Focus on the experience of the eagle. Focus on the movement, not just of the wings, but of every single feather and every single strand on the feather, and how every feather has a role to play in helping that golden eagle glide so gracefully and effortlessly. and allowing your attention to be drawn into that, into the sound that golden eagle makes while flying, by the way the wind moves over and under its wings, to the sound of its beating heart, to the sensation of its moving neck, to what that eagle can see gazing down over the landscape, what it can feel as it passes through different bits of air, and how some air can raise it up, and in other locations it can naturally lower down, and give all of your attention to that golden eagle. And so, as you do this, as you give all of your attention to that golden eagle, what you can see, what you can hear, what it would feel like flying up there, you begin to almost get tunnel vision here. Everything around your vision begins to fade away and almost turn to black. The monk begins to fade away, the monastery, the surroundings, until all you're aware of is that eagle circling overhead. And then, while aware of just the eagle circling overhead, so your attention suddenly snaps to being in the eagle, seeing through the eagle's eyes. And you realize from the perspective of this eagle that everything that makes up that you back there, meditating on the wall of the monastery, is back there. That here, in the eagle, through the eagle's eyes, you don't feel, see, or hear anything that you back there on the monastery wall sees, hears, or feels. You just feel a floating, flying, relaxing sense of peace, of calm, of stability. A sense of invigoration at your experience, and a hyper focus, and a complete lack of awareness of that you back there, and the experience of being that you back there on the monastery wall. And you allow yourself to fly as this eagle, to be going along for the journey, almost like a shared consciousness, like you're a consciousness in the mind of the eagle, while allowing the eagle to carry out its own actions. And you're just there, along for the ride, along for the experience. And as you gaze down, so you can notice rivers running through forest, a low mist. You can notice clouds in the sky. You can notice the way the sunlight illuminates the surface of water, of those rivers, of pockets of lakes within the forest. And so you fly around for some time as this eagle, gliding, feeling so effortless, so free, free from the feelings of that you back there on that wall. And then you have this sense that although you can't hear the monk talking with you, You feel like the monk is talking with you, like somehow they're helping to guide your experience. And you begin to have this experience fading away of flying with this eagle. But you find that your experience doesn't drift to the you sat in the monastery. Instead, it drifts down into that forest. And you find yourself darting and buzzing between the trees. And you realize as you hover over a pier and as you hover over an area of water that you can see your reflection, and you notice that you've turned into a green fairy, and you dart down near the water and skim the water, creating slight ripples in that water, leaving a wake of sparkly light behind you everywhere you go. You fly up in the sky, you weave between the trees, and you realize that among the trees here in this forest seem to be many fairies and many other creatures you may never ever have seen or realized were here. And as you fly, you have this sense that it's a bit like you've got a hummingbird being carried on your back. Just that sound of the buzzing wings, just the way that they allow you to make maneuvers that not even the most proficient fighter pilots could ever make. And you decide to test out what it's like being a fairy. You fly as fast as you can. You realize your senses are heightened, that you're able to respond rapidly, weaving between trees and branches. And then you slow down. You relax down onto a branch and you gaze out through the forest. And while you relax there, still gently beating your wings, just keeping yourself on the spot, just helping to remain stationary, you're creating a slight mist of sparkling light that's gently beating from your back and slightly surrounding you before you dart off out of that sparkling light and head down to the grass on the edge of the forest. And you wonder why you're having this experience. You've gone from being in an eagle flying high in the sky to being this fairy. You wonder if, as a fairy, you have the power to grant wishes or do any magic or do anything fun, but you don't know how to do those things. So you try to think, what would a fairy do? And you wave an arm while making a magic spell that you just think of off the top of your head. And as you do that, you see the most unusual creature, a donkey with the head and neck of a llama, walking past, eoring like a donkey. And on its back is a tiny little, almost like a little person. And you head over and find that it's almost like a small troll that's riding on the back of that llama. and they say hello, and they seem incredibly friendly. And you wonder what else could be done with magic. You're trying to make a horse appear, but instead you had a donkey with the head and neck of a llama, ridden by a troll. So you try again, and again you want to try and make a horse appear. And you wave a hand and click a finger, and you hope this time it'll work. Only this time, suddenly, a moose walks past that seems to have clockwork switch on its back. And that clockwork switch seems to be ticking along and turning, as in a very rigid way that moose walks past. And you decide not to try again. And you wonder what it is you're doing wrong. And then you hear a voice in your mind. You realize it's the monk. And you realize they're probably talking to you while you're sat on that wall. And that voice tells you you're overthinking it. You're trying too hard. You're trying too hard to be something else rather than being yourself. You're trying to do magic as you imagine magic would be done. And that magic isn't done as you imagine it would be done. It's done as you instinctively do it. And that the only way to perform magic is to be magic. Magic isn't something you can do, it's just something you either are or you aren't. And you don't really grasp this at first. And you walk over to the edge of a lake, your wings gently beating behind you. And you pick a small little yellow flower as you walk towards the edge of the lake. And you're aware of how big that flower is compared to you when you're so little. And you throw that flower onto the water's edge, just over the wave line. And as those waves lap into the shore and then pull back from the lake's edge, so you watch that flower gradually moving out, bobbing up and down into the water. And then once it's out in the lake a little way from the shore, sparkling starts happening around that flower. And that sparkling spreads from the petals outwards, creating almost like a sparkling hole in the water that's tinged with the yellow colour of the flower. And you feel this compulsion to fly to that hole and drop down through it. And so you fly out above the hole and you look down through the hole and you see through the hole what looks like dry land. And you stop flapping your wings and you just drop straight down through that hole. And you find yourself suddenly being a person walking through a British village. And it's a quaint, small, quiet British village. And as you look around, so you realize that this village looks incredibly old. And it isn't that the shops or the houses look incredibly old. It's that the look of them is incredibly old. And you realize that somehow this seems like it's back in time. And so you walk through the village and you head in to the main town centre where you can see a row of shops. And as you walk past the shops, one shop catches your eye, and you realize that how you're dressed looks out of place compared to the people around you. And so you decide to go into this shop and see if you can find some new clothes, something different to wear in this shop. And so you walk into that shop, you pick some items up that you want to try on, you head to the back of the shop, you head into a changing room, you change into those clothes in front of a mirror at the back of this shop. And as you look at yourself in this mirror, you end up hearing sounds around you changing. And as you exit the changing room, you find that you're even further back in the past, that the shop itself seems to have changed. And you walk out of this shop and out into the road, and you look around with a slight sense of confusion. And you realize that something about that shop and that mirror seems to have transported you back into the past, even further than you'd already traveled. And you explore this time period. You listen to people talking, people going about their everyday life. And you head down to the nearby river, and you walk along the edge of that river, and you can see that there's a water mill along the edge of this river. And you head to that water mill, and you can hear the sound of the water wheel spinning, the mill turning, and you can smell the smell of flour. And nearby the mill, you notice there seems to be a bakery, and you can smell that smell of freshly baking bread. And you take a look in the mill, and you see all the grains falling onto a grindstone. And you see as they pass onto the stone, they get broken down into smaller and smaller, finer and finer pieces, until they're almost just like dust. Then they pass through, and they pass out, and they end up in a bag to be removed and taken away from that mill. And you watch as this happens for a while. And you have this sense of the way this mill is working, that it seems to at times add water to help lubricate, to help with the process of grinding that down, and help it more comfortable as it grinds that grain down to the finest flour. And then one of the bakers comes in and begins to talk with you, and begins to explain about them having the finest, softest, fluffiest flower in the land, that there is nowhere with softer, fluffier flower than there, that it's the way the mill works that creates that soft, fluffy flour, the way it breaks it down with the grindstone, the way it uses water to be able to flush that through comfortably, to be able to create that incredibly soft flour, which passes through to a bag, and they gather it all up. They make sure it's all dried out, and then they bake with it, baking the fluffiest, most wonderful loaves of bread. And they take you through to the bakery. And as soon as you walk in, the smell you could already smell increases significantly. Suddenly you notice your mouth salivating. You notice your stomach waking up on hearing and smelling this bread being baked, as if your body is suddenly alerted to the pleasures of this bread. And they show you around and they give you a taste before you decide you've got to go. And so you leave here. You walk back towards that shop, and you have this instinctive feeling of knowing what you need to do. And back at the shop, you change back into those clothes. And as you change back into your normal clothes in front of that mirror, and you leave that changing room, you find that you're back in your own time. You're back in the time of the clothes. Except you're here in England. That you're not back in the time that you entered the shop in. You're back in your real time. And a part of you knows that while you're stood here in this English town, which still looks quaint, with many old shops and old buildings that now look like old shops and old buildings, you're aware that somewhere out there at exactly the same time, you're sat on the edge of a wall on a monastery in a mountain, meditating, and somehow projecting this you here with the help of that monk. And you walk through the town. You walk back down to that river. You find that there's only the remnants of that old bakery and the old mill. That it's now a footpath along the river, and there's a cafe there now. And you head to a park, and you sit in the park for a little bit, watching people playing, watching people walking their dogs, watching the way the shadows of the clouds gently pass across the grass. Curious what this experience is teaching you. You came to the monk to learn, to discover yourself, to connect deeply with yourself and with the world around you. Unsure what the experience would be. And the only criteria was that you had to show motivation, dedication. You had to show that you were willing to have the experience. You were willing to climb that mountain. You were willing to engage with the monks in the monastery and with the monk on the wall. And then trust that monk enough to allow yourself to experience what they guide you to experience, and to trust that those experiences are for your benefit, to help you understand yourself and your connection with others and other parts of the world around you in a whole new way. And as you realize you're beginning to deeply understand, you begin to have a sense of the wind on your face. And you start feeling like you're sitting on that wall. And then you start to be aware of your body. And notice how incredibly comfortable your body feels sat here. That it's as if somehow you are here, and yet you've left behind those parts that you wanted left behind. A bit like taking all of the blocks that make something up and reforming them, putting them back together to something that looks very similar and yet is slightly different. Or in the same way that throwing a stone into a pool of water changes that pool of water so that it's no longer the same as it was before, and yet to anyone else who looks at that pool of water, it'll look the same as it's always looked. They'd be unaware that a stone was thrown into that pool of water, that the water level is ever so slightly higher, that everything was moved because of that stone sploshing into the water, passing to the bottom. All the atoms in that water carefully moved and jiggled about and changed places because of the stone. And yet only the person who threw the stone in would know that. And the monk climbs down off the wall and starts to walk towards the monastery. And you can tell from the way they're walking that they're walking with intent. And you begin to follow. And you follow the rules that you were told earlier. And so you begin to walk with intent. And you walk into that monastery where it's suddenly peaceful and incredibly quiet, with just the slightest echo from the footsteps of the monk and from your footsteps as you walk into that monastery. And the monk turns and guides you down some steps. And the monk says there are 10 steps, and they descend into the dark. So it's best that you count your way down, so as to safely walk to the bottom, and that you'll go deeper into the monastery as you do. And things will become increasingly peaceful in that deeper chamber under the monastery. And so you begin to descend those steps: 10, 9, 8, going deeper and deeper down those steps, descending into the monastery, counting your way down as you go: 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, with everything getting quieter and quieter around you: 2, 1, and then hearing a slight echoing of the first footstep on the floor in this chamber, and then walking in the dark through this chamber, following where you feel the monk is walking. And then after a few moments, you notice the monk has lit a torch and then used that torch to light a flame. And with that flame lit, so this chamber becomes illuminated. And as this chamber becomes illuminated, so you notice the incredible mosaic on the floor, the repeating patterns, where when you look at one part, it looks like one pattern, and then as you zoom in on that pattern, you notice that it just repeats to a smaller and smaller scale, looking almost exactly the same, as if the same type of pattern is present, but looks subtly different. And so a part of your attention is drawn to absorbing yourself in that pattern, in following the pattern from the largest scale down to the smallest scale you can observe, and then back out to the largest scale again, and then back down to that smallest scale. And next to the flame that the monk lit is a bowl of water, and the monk places some rose petals in that water, and as they float on the surface of the water, so they begin to give off the most beautiful rose fragrance. You can just have a sense of wafting into your nose. And the monk tells you to put your hands in the water and gently pat your face with that water. Pat the water over your forehead. Close your eyes, pat the water over your eyes. Pat it gently on your cheeks, on the side of your temple. And gently pat your face with that water. And as you do that, you can really notice that rose smell contained within the water. And once you've done that, and you open your eyes, and you dry your hands by rubbing them on your legs, you notice what look like ghosts or spirits walking around and standing around you in a circle. And you look around and you see them all looking so friendly, gazing at you. And the monk explains that these 12 spirits watch over the monastery. They watch over those who come to the monastery. They share collective knowledge and wisdom. That each of these 12 was once in charge of the monastery, and when they passed on, they became one of the 12. And that occasionally they pass on from their spirit form, but they only do that at a time that there's another one of the monks to take their place, so that they can maintain at least 12 of them to be able to offer their collective knowledge and wisdom of all of the techniques, strategies they've learned, all they know about connecting with the world around them, that it was a number of years ago that one monk stumbled upon a way of being able to become one with the universal energy and to be able to almost become real as the energy, to be able to have consciousness in a single location contained within that universal energy, and then powering that consciousness through deep thought to be able to focus that energy on creating a spirit like body, and that they realize that they can connect with the past, the present, and the future through this universal energy that was there at the beginning of time and will be there to the end of time. And so, with the progress you've made, they're allowing you to access their counsel, to be here to ask questions, and they'll answer your questions, and they'll share knowledge, and they can share their healing and their wisdom. And so, they direct you to a chair. You sit down on that chair. One of the spirits comes over. They lay their hand gently on your forehead, and their hand feels so soft, with a very slight tingle to it, almost as if you're being touched by silk. And their hand seems to give off a slight eucalyptus scent, as if something about this energy being, this process of being energy, gives off eucalyptus scent that just seems to fill and clear the nostrils and helps you to breathe better and relax deeper. And they tell you to just take a few moments with your eyes closed to begin to breathe deeply and comfortably. And as you breathe so deeply and comfortably, just have a sense in your mind's eye of a pocket watch just gently swinging left and right, left and right in front of you. Just have a sense of watching that pocket watch swinging left and right, left and right. And as you watch that pocket watch swinging left and right, having a sense of what that pocket watch would sound like. Maybe there's a swooshing sound as it swings left and right. And having a sense of all of your attention being on that watch. And while you watch that watch, having a sense of counting backwards from 10 in your mind, and going deeper and more relaxed into the experience, connecting yourself with the universal energy in a way that allows these 12 guides, these 12 spirits, to share their knowledge, their wisdom, their healing with you, to be able to respond to any questions, any thoughts you may have, to be able to help you in any way you want help, and allowing you while you count down to be able to formulate the question you would like to ask. And when you formulate that question you would like to ask, Once you get to the count of one, you can ask that question and they can communicate the answer. And they can communicate that answer in a period of silence. And when they communicate that answer in the period of silence, they may communicate it with a word, a phrase, a sentence, or it could be with a feeling, a gesture, or it could be in a way that you just know or understand, or something you're going to discover, but you can be comfortable in the knowledge that they've communicated that, and that you can then use that knowledge, use that healing for your own well-being, knowing you can always come and ask them questions again in the future. And so, once they've said that, you begin your counting down. 10, 9, 8, going deeper into the experience, connecting deeper with that universal energy. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then presenting the question. And then they can take their time to respond with their answer. And then you'll know on some level the answer has been received. That their all knowing knowledge, wisdom, insights, and healing are able to be used and transmitted back to you at this time. Even if you forget later what it was, and what it is, and what it shall be. And then they remove their hand from your forehead. You have this feeling of them stepping back into their circle. You have a sense of relaxing there. And you almost feel this feeling around you of a warmth beginning to spread so comfortably down through the top of your head, relaxing and spreading down through your neck muscles, your face muscles, down to your shoulders, down through your shoulders, down each arm to your fingertips, down your back, down your front, all the way down your sides, down to your legs, and that warmth, that comfort spreading all the way down to your feet. And as that warmth and comfort spreads all around you, you begin to have that feeling almost like you're wrapped up in a chrysalis. Like somehow change is happening and you're being wrapped up with extra comfort and a deep sense of love and kindness, almost like the most loving hug, the most comforting hug that gradually, very slowly, begins to release itself as you have this sense almost like you're unzipping and stepping out of a sleeping bag. And being aware of being sat in that seat. And as you rise from that seat, so you have this feeling like you've left something behind in that seat. Something you didn't need to take with you. Something that's right to be left right there. And you have that sense of it as that monk is smiling at you, and you watch as those other 12 fade away, and the monk leads you back out of this area, back out of this chamber, back up those steps, back to the main part of the monastery. And the monk tells you you've received what you came here to receive, and you'll discover the changes from that over the next few days. And you can come back and revisit regularly if you're willing to make the journey and willing to engage with the experience. And the monk shows you on your way. And so you head back down the mountain. You head back the way you came. You head back through the forest, wondering if you can spy any of those green fairies. And you head all the way back towards your hometown. And as you head towards your hometown, on your journey, you see a fairground. And with that fairground, you see what looks like a zoo attached. And you go and visit those animals at the zoo. And they tell you that this is a travelling zoo, that these are all rescue animals, with the plan to release them back into the wild once rehabilitated. And so they're kept as wild as they can in this setting. And that they have to meet certain criteria to be allowed here. They have to be able to be suitable to be able to go back into the wild. They're only here very temporarily for any given animal, just for brief periods of support. And you look around at the animals here, and you seem to feel a deep connection with them. And then you head in to the fair. You see a small tent. You walk up, being nosy, you look in the tent, and you see someone there, sat at a table. And you see that they have just laid out some tarot cards. And they call you over by name. They tell you these are your cards. And they turn over a card and tell you that it's about your past, that you've had some challenges, that you sometimes doubt yourself and yet try to portray an air of being confident. You still think of yourself as being really young, as not really being as mature as you try to portray yourself as being. That you really try to fit in, but find that it can be a struggle at times. And that sometimes people will tell you that you appear really confident. And you may smile, you may pretend to agree, and yet internally you worry that that's not actually you. That you're the same person inside your mind that you were when you were much younger. You haven't grown up with your body. That the person you see in the mirror is different to the person you feel like inside. And then they turn over the next card and they tell you that this is your present. And as you look at that card and listen to them talking, they tell you that you have worries. You have things you'd like to achieve and don't know whether you can succeed. That you have a dream that you'd like to follow, but are unsure where to start, and that it's hard sometimes to find the motivation to be able to start that thing you really want to do. That you've got a circle of friends, but only a few who you would class as really close, and that you would really like to sometimes have a few more friends, or even just that one friend that's just right for you. That you do have some great friends, but not necessarily that one special friend. And they start telling you about the present. And then they turn over a card and they say, "This is your future." And as they start telling you about the future, they tell you you've just had an experience, and that something about that experience has made this card slightly cloudy, as if the future you would have been told just days ago has been shifted by some magical experience, some deep, transformative experience, and that there's some pain in your life that can shift and change, that sometimes discomfort can turn into something better, can lead to opportunities where you can find some comfort contained even on the smallest level of that discomfort, like discovering an acorn in soil that nothing can grow in, and yet somehow, against all odds, with just enough water and nurturing, just the right amount of sunlight, that acorn grows and sprouts through. And somehow, despite everything trying to eat it down, everything coming over and trying to trample it, it manages to survive, manages to bounce back and grow taller and taller until it's too tall to trample. It's too tall for a rabbit to come along and nibble at it and eat it down. And it grows taller and taller. And while it's growing taller and taller, it faces many storms and is able to survive those storms because it just flexes and bends in the wind until it reaches a size where it's able to dig its roots in so deeply that in dry periods, its roots are so deep they can still find water. In windy times, its roots are so deep it remains upright. And it stretches and reaches for the sky and lasts so gracefully, with some scars on it caused by its journey, some scars from lightning, some scars from fire, some scars from droughts, many scars that show off the life that this tree has led. And yet here it is with the most beautiful, perfect green leaves, stretching to the sky, burrowed deep under the ground, giving life to the surrounding area. And they tell you that this is what that third card means for you. And they hand you that third card, and you turn the third card around and you look at it, and you see on that card a dove flying with a twig in its beak, with the view of an ocean in the background, and some distant islands, and some wispy clouds. And you leave this tent, placing that card in a pocket. And as you leave the tent and turn around, you find that the zoo and the fair seem to have vanished, and where they were is now just empty land. And you're curious about that. You continue your journey home. And on arrival home, you have the most comfortable bath with some candles that you light dotted around the bath. And you put the matches off to one side, relax yourself down under the bubbles, smelling that fresh pine smell given off by the candles, listening to something relaxing in the background, feeling the warmth of the bath, the tickling of the bubbles. And after deeply relaxing in the bath, you head to bed. You settle down in bed. And as you think about the experience you've had, you begin to drift and float comfortably asleep. You begin to dream about that oak tree. You begin to dream about sitting in the tree, feeling the bark beneath you, touching the bark with your hand, feeling this sense of almost like by touching the bark of the tree, you connect on a deeper level with nature and almost sense a communication between the tree and yourself. And scurrying along one of the branches, you see a squirrel heading over, stopping, looking over at you tentatively, heading a bit closer, flicking its tail a few times while it stops, perching up on its back legs, holding its paws up in front, sniffing a little bit, heading a bit closer, gradually feeling a sense of deep trust for you, until eventually it comes all the way up to you, rests down on your lap, and lets you pet it gently, feeling its fluffy tail, feeling the warmth it gives off through its fur, forming that relationship with the world around you as you comfortably and relaxed drift and float asleep.